Hi, I'm Mark Linsenmayer of the Partially Examined Life Philosophy Podcast and blog. And Frithjof?
I'm Frithjof Bergmann. I am a professional philosopher. I taught philosophy at Stanford and at Chicago and at Berkeley and for a long time at Michigan. But I have done many other things. And very often when I get introduced, people mention that I actually also made money boxing and that I made money with any number of things on my way. I farmed quite a number of times, actually, on my way to doing a stint as a philosophy professor. But then I started to do other things. And for many years now, I have worked on what is called new work.
Yes, and our point today is to introduce that. This will hopefully be the first of a series. Thanks for the folks at bloggingheads.tv that they like this idea. But this is actually, Frithjof and I have had a couple discussions. So if you want more information on this, partiallyexaminedlife.com is my podcast page. And we did two longish, 2 hours or close to that, interviews with Frithjof to lay out what new work is and address a lot of the questions that leap out at one when describing this admittedly pretty complex idea. But here, we just want to give a short, basic introduction to it. This is really a call to other folks that post on this site and to folks that watch here to engage these ideas. Really, to what I want to impress today is that the job system is a social problem. That's usually not something that when we're listing what are the society's ills that we need to address. You'll get poverty, you'll get unemployment, but the fact that we have jobs is a good thing, right? That's how we get money. That's it gives us a sense of belonging. It gives us something to do. But according to this new work viewpoint, the problems of poverty, of unemployment, and really of overall job dissatisfaction, which a lot of people have, are endemic. They're systemic problems that normally, if somebody's right now unhappy with their job, you just say, that's an individual problem. You need to explore other career options. You need to get more training. You need to do something like that. You might say, oh, well, there's maybe not so many other options in the thing that you're doing because the employment landscape is not so good right now. So maybe the government has to pump money into revving the economy up to create more positions or something like that. But the toolbox of solutions is pretty narrow in terms of what we conceive. Either it's let the job system, let the economy go as it's been, as it efficiently provides goods for all of us, or it's have big government step in and do something and they'll probably screw it up. Those seem to be the only solutions that we have. But Frithjof has been working with this for 35 years now?
Almost 35 years.
Yes, of alternatives to the job system, not just as a thinker, but actually going into places like Detroit and India and South Africa and prisons and Native American populations and quite a few places around the country, mostly that have their major job problem is that there are no jobs around there, but also with Silicon Valley executives and other folks that just aren't finding what they're doing particularly meaningful, are trying to devise alternatives to the expectation that what you do with your full time, your non-sleeping time, is make a living. That's what we all have to do, and we've had so much technology that has gotten rid of so many jobs, these labor-saving devices, that they should actually save some labor, should free up some time, so that then we could have the time to explore and pursue more meaningful work in the rest of our time. So it's decoupling the idea of a job on the one hand, which is a social creation designed really to generate goods, to generate services, and it's done. The economy has now we have more goods than we know what to do with. But on the other hand, there's no reason to think that a system like that, created to use us as its tools in creating these things, should also be the sum total of human fulfillment. There's no reason to think that those things are coupled, but yet work doing a project that really means something to you can be enormously fulfilling, and that's something that is worth pursuing as a society.
Maybe it's worth mentioning, by way of establishing a way of talking to each other, that I did teach at Stanford, not for very long, but at the point at which Google was just beginning, and also Apple was just beginning. And to some extent, people listened to the lectures I was given then. And also, I have worked a great deal as a consultant to many different companies in quite a number of different countries. So I don't come into this discussion quite unprepared. Let me get to the central point, which is that the job system is not the only way of organizing work. On the contrary, the job system is the way of organizing work that we have put all the emphasis and all the hopes on in the last 200 years. That is, the job system was only invented, was only created around the time of the Industrial Revolution, so roughly 200 years ago. And very importantly, prior to that, people worked in radically different ways. And to make that vivid and concrete, most people, even now, in many countries that's still the case, worked at farming. And I myself was a farmer 3 times in my life, and working as a farmer is as different from working in a factory as one can imagine. It's in every respect different. And so it is a different work system. And that's the crucial term. That is, for my way of looking at, or for the people who associate with new work, and that's even explains the term new work, the idea is a work system that is not the job system, but that is a different new work system, fundamentally different in its design, in its structure, in its intention, but it is a way of organizing work, which, if you think about it for a moment, is actually not so difficult to understand. That is, even in the beginning, when the job system first came in, there were many people, some very important in American history, Jefferson maybe being the best known one, who at that point, roughly 200 years ago now, said the job system bode ill. That is, they shook their head, they were skeptical. They thought that the transition from agricultural work to job work probably would result in a whole set of calamitous consequences. And that is very much the picture we now have. That is, our view is that in the last 200 years, which is the duration of the job system, it hasn't existed longer. It's actually, therefore, a relatively young and short-lived structure. The ills, the disadvantages, I sometimes use words like the tsunamis that the job system has created have grown tremendously, so much so, and that's an absolutely crucial point, that it does make sense, even though it may at first be a little bit startling to say, no, it is not enough, given the tsunamis we have, it is not enough to tighten this little screw or turn this a little bit or increase that expense or speed up that or put a little bit more emphasis on yonder thing. That is not enough to fix the problems. The problems are enormous, are endemic, are systemic, are epidemic, and therefore we now say, okay, we have worked for quite some long time with many other people on the idea of a dramatically new work system. Now, let me quickly say the main calamities that we see in connection with the job system. The most obvious big one is what I call sometimes the butcher split. That is the split between the ever-increasing number of poor people, and they are increasing in spite of some newfangled ways of trying to cover that up. That poverty in India, poverty in China, poverty in Russia has not really decreased. And on the other side, and that we are all plenty familiar with, the number of wealthy people is also growing, but most importantly, their wealth has gone through the roof and has skyrocketed. The split between poor people and rich people has become a scandal, has become a calamity, or has become a social disease, or has become something where I would become a little bit aggressive and say, no, this is not just some kind of moral problem, but this is dangerous. I spent time in North Africa when the so-called spring was happening in North Africa, and it's obvious that in all kinds of countries, people are in the process of rebelling, are getting ready to rebel more. All of Africa is in some condition of arming itself for the rebellion that is necessary in order to get Africa out of the sand dune or out of the sand hole in which Africa is drowning. So, to our mind, what is happening is that a very large part of humanity is arming itself for a war that will happen between the rich and the poor. And so it's not just a moral problem. We need to do something in order to avert the coming and maybe the ultimate defeat in this war. But the split between poverty and wealth is only one of the epidemics. We take the view that the financial crisis that some people pretend has been overcome, and people even talk of sort of the recession that is behind us. Frankly, I think that is ludicrously mistaken. Whatever we experienced and whatever we now experience is not a recession. A recession is something that was connected and that only grew out of the whole idea of cyclical economics. And what we now have has nothing whatever to do with cyclical economics. The three main causes of the current crisis or of the current calamity is the three main causes are: one, automation. That is not a cyclical phenomenon, but on the contrary, it is a steadily increasing phenomenon. Secondly, globalization. Again, not a cyclical phenomenon, but something that is steadily increasing. And thirdly, and oddly, that is very often not mentioned when one talks about what has gone wrong and what needs to be fixed. To my mind, the third in these, and maybe the biggest one, is the migration away from farms. That is, until not that long ago, something close to 80% of the population was working on farms, and that was their job. So 80% had a job that was farming. But farming has become unworkable on a small farm. What's left are huge agricultural enterprises, agricultural businesses, agricultural industries, but they employ very few people. And so what has happened? And if one wants to have any picture at all of what we are actually experiencing now, one must put into that picture that millions and millions and millions of people in every country you may name, and that includes countries like the United States, right in the Middle West, are migrating away from farms. You can drive through empty villages if you are in Nebraska or wherever. And the point is that these people very often have moved into the cities. Detroit is maybe the most scandalous example of that. And for a while had jobs in the cities to which they migrated. But in many, many cases, the farmers that move into the cities end up unemployed, end up in a situation of corruption, drugs, prostitution, etc., all of that. These are the cliches that we associate with that. So I'm saying the migration away from farms is one of the largest, one of the most momentous developments that we need to think about and that we need to respond to. We cannot simply say, okay, so we'll make the economy run a little bit faster and we'll put a little more oil on the wheels that are already screeching. It won't do, because the numbers are wrong. The numbers are enormous. I mean, it was not long ago, 80% of all people worked on farms. Now, the statistics roughly are that 4% of all people work on farms. So that gives one a sense of the magnitude of what we are up against. There are other things that can be mentioned in this, like the financial crisis, like the entrepreneurial crisis, simply that we produce too much, very much and very, very importantly for new work. Also, the fact that speeding up the economy, constantly making the economy grow in order to create more jobs has resulted in the disasters having to do with natural, with nature, with resources, with the whole green problem. And so we include the problem of the environment in the things that the job system has witnessed upon us. And this may be now a cardinal thought that may help people to pull this together and to understand it and to put it to get a grip on it. That is, new work is an attempt, a long-lasting attempt that has already gone on for something like 30 years, to create a fundamentally different structure in which work is organized, a fundamentally different set of values, a fundamentally different way of sort of conceiving what work is all about. It is that, and it is that sort of in two directions. One direction is because the job system in the last stretch is responsible for all of the diseases, all of the calamities with which we are witness. So on the one side, the job system is the devil in the picture. The job system has caused everything that is bad. But to our mind, a new work system, the new work system on which we work, is also the way up, so that we are not just trying to somehow ameliorate things. We are not just trying to make it less bad. On the contrary, the idea is we start from scratch, we do something dramatic, and that means we develop a new system where work will be different, where the economy will be different, where the culture will be different, but where in all respects we will have a much more intelligent, a much more cheerful, a much more productive, a much more humane system than we have now. So there is the two-sidedness is crucial for an understanding of new work, that we, on the one side, see 6 or 7 enormous evils like great waves, like tsunamis coming towards us. That's the one side. The other side is that with intelligence, with imagination, with innovation, we can not just avert this and postpone it, but we can create a new system of work and of culture and of production that will be infinitely, incomparably more humane and more satisfying than the one under which we have suffered in the last 200 years. So this optimistic, this positive, this utopian dimension is very much part of new work. On the one side, get rid of the evil that is besetting us. On the other side, in the process of getting rid of this evil, create the basis for something vastly more desirable than we have now. Now, I can, in very few minutes, give an idea of where this goes, but I would say, no, it's not that difficult to understand, but it does take a little time to understand. But very quickly, the perhaps most important quick step into understanding an economy that would be different from the economy we have now. And that is difficult for most people to in any way grasp. Could we really have a different economy? Is a different economy not only more of the same from what we have now? Is a really different economy at all imaginable? Is it thinkable? What would it be like, a really different economy, a different economic system? And there are two quick steps that give one at least a first idea of what a different economy would look like. One is the concept of miniaturization. Take your phone. How many functions are placed into the thing that you can hold in the palm of your hand that is your iPhone or your whatever it was in the past? And it's, of course, enormous. Our capacity to miniaturize, that is, to actually put things into very, very small dimensions and have things that in the past were enormously large become ever smaller and smaller and work in smaller and smaller dimensions, but work very effectively in these small dimensions. That's one step, one idea, one flash that can give one a first impression of, aha, we are not condemned, so to say, into a steady, ever-increasing, ever more alarming growth, that everything has to become still bigger and still more centralized and still more oppressive and still more centralized in the sense that the split between rich and poor grows ever more bloody and ever deeper. But on the contrary, maybe there is hope in the idea of making things smaller. That's one point. The other point, the second point that helps one to gain a foothold, to gain a first idea of what a different economy might look like, is a critique of the concept of mass manufacturing. It's odd that that is actually a fully developed literature, but most people are very unaware of the fact that mass manufacturing is problematic. That mass manufacturing is not the inevitable and obvious way of manufacturing to which no alternative is conceivable. No, it's different. Mass manufacturing is in many ways not the most efficient way to manufacture, but on the contrary, is an extremely problematic way to manufacture. To make that concrete and specific and vivid, roughly, of anything whatsoever that you go and buy, whether this is lipstick or whether this is a car, the actual value of what you are buying is only 20% of what you are paying. That is what it took to manufacture the lipstick, or what it took to manufacture the furniture or the washing machine or the car or whatever it is that you are about to buy. Actually, it required only 20% to make this. It was relatively cheap and inexpensive to make it. What was added onto it was due to mass manufacturing, by which I mean mass manufacturing involves the addition of transportation, of advertising, of selling. There is a whole long chain of things that are included or that are required, that are added to the process of actually making something, which it makes mass manufacturing much less efficient than we very often think. So let me try to say this once more. That is, mass manufacturing is a form of manufacturing where, of course, there is the manufacturing part. But in mass manufacturing, much else is added onto it. And that makes mass manufacturing problematic and questionable. And that is now crucial for the understanding of new work and of a new economy, of a new concept of economy. Because what we have developed is the idea of, we used to call it high-tech self-providing, but we now use the term community production. That is, it is possible using the microdimensionalization, the diminishment in size that has become possible. It is now possible to manufacture in small units, in small rooms, in small spaces, almost everything that one needs, and one doesn't need anymore large factories. And large factories are a matter of the past and are not the most efficient way to produce. But the most efficient way to produce is in small spaces and small rooms. The vivid example, the picturesque, the sort of pocketbook exemplification of that is, as I already mentioned, the phone and other things like that. But the point is that, for example, last year we manufactured in Austria, in the town that is most famous for automotive manufacturing in Austria, we produced an electric motorcycle that was built by very small organizations. There were only about 12 people involved in the manufacturing of that motorcycle, which all of us agreed was cool and which was a great success and was hailed in Austria as a world first and a great breakthrough. But to us, this is only one example. The idea is a whole new economy can be built around these first steps in the direction of an economy in which everything is produced on site, in which things are produced in a fashion that we call community production. That is, they are made by the people in the community and in small rooms with very small devices, with very small machines, with very small surrounding apparatus. And that gives a first idea, an image of what a next economy could be like. An economy not in the direction of ever more centralization, but in the direction of the opposite direction. Decentralized, disseminated. Many, so to say, we now have reached the point. I'm trying to make this last point as vivid as I can. We have now reached a point where in any village, in any farm, we can produce anything from cars down to phones, down to washing machines, down to furniture, down to bricks. Bricks have recently made quite a head, have sort of created something around that. That's possible. We don't need cement factories anymore. There are other ways of making bricks that don't require factories. That gives you some idea of what the manufacturing part of new work would be like. In addition to that, that's only the first step. There is that other way of manufacturing. There is that other economic system. We talk about a different economy. We talk about a different organization of work. And we talk about a different culture. The different organization of work. The most crucial part of that is that work can become something where we use the word polarity. Work in the last 200 years has exhausted people, has drained people, has discouraged people, has demented people, has done dreadful things to very large numbers of people. Work could become, and there's the word polarization, something that for many people, not everybody, but for many people, would be the best experience on their life. Now, one sentence that comes to mind is that sex has to be very good to stand the competition with really good work. Really good work can be the very best thing, the most three things. It can give you energy instead of take energy away from you. It can give you a sense of purpose instead of make you feel meaningless and without purpose. It can give you work. If work is work that you really seriously want to do, then work can become also, on top of giving you strength and on top of giving you energy, it can give you life. If you feel that you're not really living, doing work that you really want to do can become something that makes you feel, I have started to be alive because I'm doing something that I really believe in, that I want to do, that excites me. That's now become possible. using the most recent technologies, that is what work can become, and that is the essence of new work.
Well, thanks, Frithjof. Well, that really laid out most of the pieces here. A lot to chew on. So there's provocation. I know there's some economic experts on this site that we'd love to engage a little more in some of the theory behind, why economists might, how Frithjof's story here dovetails with what various economists of the conservative and liberal stripes, are predicting about automation, about world poverty, all that kind of stuff. Also, I imagine a lot of liberal advocacy groups of various sorts, environmental and otherwise, will see a lot of touchstones with what Frithjof was talking about. I think in our last couple minutes here, I just want to lay out a couple things that new work is not. Just that there are some very obvious misconceptions that jump to mind. One thing, one of your most memorable things from when I was taking classes with you back in the University of Michigan in the early 90s, Frithjof, was that you said that if you think a violent revolution is necessary to achieve your political aims, then something's gone wrong with your thinking, that you're not thinking subtly enough, that even though you're talking about a new culture, a new economic system, there's nothing in that says that, democracy needs to go away or anything like that. In fact, this solution of community production is really a market solution to the job issue that, if not right now, then certainly within our generation. So somebody who already has a job and maybe feels that they are not being fulfilled, they want to work fewer hours, but there's maybe not enough opportunities. Well, the idea is you could use this community production as high textile providing to make a lot of the things that you otherwise would buy now. So you need less money, and then you can get away. You get more leverage versus your employer. You can work. Find a situation where you can afford to work fewer hours, and just the more people that do this, then the more the power balance shifts between big corporations that every government has to say, please come and we'll beg you to offer a few more jobs, and it's really a tremendous waste of government money in terms of the number of jobs created per the amount that's lost from tax breaks and other things. And of course, it's states competing against each other, communities competing against each other. It's really a losing game for just about all involved. So there's nothing, the political, I think we can separate out in some ways the job system and how this should be reformed from should there be political reforms that go with that. Those are really two different questions. That there's nothing inherently, it's great. Somebody, when we had done our podcast about this, said, oh, this is just, the things that Frithjof are recommending is just warmed over anarchism. You can read a lot of anarchist literature that recommends these very same things. That's great if you see those connections and those, that's a cause that you're in favor of. By all means, jump on board and see if new work is something that you can contribute to, that you can incorporate these ideas into your own thinking and your own projects. But, I think what Frithjof is suggesting is organizationally, in some ways, more modest, more actually doable, more politically feasible than certainly anything like anarchism. And we can't go into it now, but, when Frithjof was young, he was a Marxist. But then seeing the fall of the Soviet Union and really just what things were like even before the fall of there, how it really wasn't working, that really socialism and capitalism have the same problem with jobs. They still equate this, the meaning of a person's life. What we're supposed to do is to get a job, which is mostly somebody else telling you what to do, and that's what you have to do to make a living. That those are things that were common to both systems, and that socialism had a lot of issues in terms of just actually getting things done that made it problematic in a lot of ways. So what is being suggested here is there are lots of touch points to things. Karl Marx talked a lot about having work that that you identify with, that you're engaged with, unalienated work. That's really what Frithjof is arguing for. But again, there's this difference between, can you actually make the thing a job now into unalienated work? Probably not for most people. Or can you somehow marginalize that so that you're spending, 2 hours of your day in a traditional job that you get some income from, and then another 2 hours a day engaged in this community production. So you're actually helping to, grow your own food, create, manufacture your own products. And I know that sounds crazy. I don't want to go out and work in a garden or something, but there are lots of ways. It's not necessarily that everybody would be doing all these things, but that more of what you would be doing in that respect to get the things you need would be working for yourself in a group to create these things. And then the rest of your time would be working on, at least for a lot of people, would be working on something that's often called a calling, right? This work that is truly meaningful, that, obviously there still need to be people dealing with the garbage. That could be a job work. That's not going to be somebody's calling. But once that's out of the way, or once this high-tech self-providing, this community production is out of the way, you should still have a substantial amount of time left to pursue these great projects. And there's not an assumption that everybody is an artist or has a burning passion that if only I didn't have a job filling my time right now, I would know what to go out and do. And I really want, there are a lot of people that have dreams like that. In fact, if you've never gotten to seriously explore those dreams, they could be profoundly misconceived. That we really have to, it's a practical problem, and one that Frithjof and his various new work projects, new work centers has been dealing with for these many years of how to help people figure out what they really, really want to do, how to, that finding a calling like this is an ongoing process, that, just because somebody thinks they want to be a rock star doesn't mean that this is a well thought out goal that will sustain them as their calling for their life. That, we all have the capacity to have multiple sort of dreams, things we get energy out of this sort. And in fact, for most people, it's not that when you ask them questions like this, is they want to write symphonies, they want to be rock stars. It's that they end up wanting to do something moral, something of service to people, something that is meaningful in that sense. So that's even if you've got something like the what Switzerland is considering now in terms of providing a basic minimum income for everybody, which is essentially decouples the making a living, right, supporting yourself from a job. That's a good step. But that's not enough by itself. If you just fulfill needs like that and then leave people with no direction, then you're going to get a lot of lying around and alcoholism and watching a lot of TV. That there really has to be an active civic project to engage with this idea of what is meaningful work and help people figure out what they want to do with this time that they have. Do you have any last words to add, Frithjof, before we sign off for this one and hopefully have another discussion pretty soon?
Maybe just one point quickly.
Sure.
Namely, I think it was very important for the understanding of new work to understand that Marxism did not solve the problem of work. That on the contrary, I spent time on the other side of the Iron Curtain, and the experience for me was like the experience of the death of God. That is, I was appalled by how discouraged, how very, very alienated from their work people in Russia and in the communist countries feel. So the idea of socialism is, to my mind, a profound mistake. It does not solve the problem of how to make work something wonderful. That is, sort of say, left over for the work to really solve the problem of work and turn work into something exciting and exhilarating and life-giving. That did not happen under socialism.
All right. Well, thanks again to the Blogging Heads TV folks for letting us do this. We have to have more of these discussions in the future to get some other folks on who are involved in these various new work projects, who are involved in the various technologies that Frithjof was referring to, and also, I invite folks who are reacting in violent opposition to some of what you're hearing here to engage us in comments on this video and in other ways, and perhaps we can get some discussions with economists or other folks to enrich this this picture we've got here. So again, my website is partiallyexaminedlife.com, and if you look on the All Episodes page, you can see 2 different interviews with Frithjof, way at the bottom, very recent. And Frithjof's page is newworknewculture.com, which lays out some of the projects and technologies that Frithjof's organization has been engaged with. Well, thanks for talking to me, Frithjof.
Thank you very much for the opportunity that this dialogue has given us. And yes, I want to emphasize once more the word dialogue and discussion. Please, let's have discussion and ask questions that you consider critical questions. That would be very, very welcome, to have a discussion of those things that irritate or bother you or make you skeptical.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.